Okay, young adults, I can see you. Go sit down. Sit down, sit down. Huh? Oh. Oh. Yeah, you guys can move along. All right, thank you. Thank you for participating in that. It is. I just would like to preface, this is not a chance, or this is not a calling out if you're not part of a life group or whatever it is. Not shaming anyone, but one of the reasons why this happens at Big Top is that so that everyone or in your youth group can see that you've responded to the message, and then there's actually prayer and good follow-up afterwards, because if that's happening around the room, that gets a little chaotic. But yeah, it's just a chance. If you are not connected into a life group, the wonderful Andrew Budden will help you out there, or you can talk to someone that you are connected with.
At Big Top, the MCs pray for the speaker, and they pray Psalm 19, and the audience joins in, so you guys will join in. So I'm gonna say the lines, and you guys are just gonna say the last word. So it'll be, let the words of her mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Sound good? Brilliant. Let's pray. Let the words of her mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, guys. I love this. I love that we get to do this youth service and as part of our Wholehearted series. And we're celebrating youth today and talking about wholehearted celebration. That is our title. As a native English speaker, one of the perks for me moving to New Zealand after living in Germany for 10 years was a return to hearing my mother tongue as the common language in public places. But I quickly discovered a few differences. Week one, I was told we feed supper to kids at youth group, and my American brain was blown away that we were going to provide a whole meal for 60 kids at 9 p.m. Only to discover we just gave them supper, which here is a reasonable snack. So I thought I was pretty well adjusted after a couple of months. When then at youth group, I heard murmurs during youth group that the supper that week was something everyone was getting really excited about. I was getting increasingly disgusted with the ever-mounting hype when my American brain thought we were going to be having something like this, warmed up potato chips, when in reality, we were having hot chips, and I just didn't know what that was. So people were reasonably excited, as they should be. The more immersed I am in New Zealand culture, the less often these embarrassing confusions happen. But I still have to do the mahi to make sense of things that are different from what I grew up with. And I feel like that's what reading Chronicles is like. The history books in the Bible are so loaded with cultural references that even when we translate them from Hebrew into English, we still find words used in a way that isn't our norm. Or there's weird habits that don't make sense because we're missing the cultural significance, and we've got a bit of mahi to do to make it make sense. And today's passage is like that, dealing with some fancy furniture and festival traditions that seem bland if you don't know the cultural relevance of them. With that in mind, I'm actually going to stop at a couple points in the reading to explain a few details for those of us who didn't grow up in ancient Near Eastern Israel. But what I want to do is I don't want us to get so caught up in the details that we miss the point of this passage, which is a big celebration of God's faithfulness to follow through on his promises and to party with us. So far, our Wholehearted series has been excerpts leading up to this dedication of the temple that we're about to get to. And God promised David this stuff would happen. David prepared for some of these things, and his son Solomon is seeing it through. So with that context, let's read starting in 2 Chronicles chapter 5, beginning at verse 2. Then Solomon summoned to Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion to the city of David. Okay, one verse in, and we already have some loaded stuff. So Solomon's bringing everyone, and I mean everyone important, to get this box. It is the most special box in the whole Bible. And if you don't know the history of the Ark of the Covenant, we're already off to a weird start. But what this is a special box that was made back in the time of Moses to hold significant items relevant to the relationship between God and his people. And it might have looked something like this. This is a replica based on descriptions from the Bible. So through the history of this nation, this box was representative of where God's presence would sit in the most holy place of the tent or tabernacle that Moses made, or this temple that's being built where the Israelites worshiped God. They would also sometimes bring this box, the ark, into battle. And there's a really epic story that I love, one time where the box gets stolen by the enemies of the Israelites, and the enemies put it in front of their own false god idol. And then the false god falls on its face in front of the true God's special seat. So this is a special box, and it's a big deal to move it to the special temple that has been built for it. So our next verse in this passage says, all the Israelites came together to the king at the time of the festival in the 7th month. Now again, for those of you not familiar with the Jewish calendar of holidays, this is a special time because there's actually 3 festivals that happen in the Jewish calendar in the 7th month. It's like their most holy party time. And importantly, it covers their Jewish New Year, this special day of atonement and sacrifice for sins, and then a week-long festival of living in shelters outside to remember the wandering in the wilderness that happened with their ancestors in the time of Moses. So I want to note here that in this story that we're reading today, it's happening in the cycle of celebration time, which connects to our big idea that God shows up to celebrate when his people celebrate. So when all the elders of Israel had arrived, the Levites took up the ark, and they brought up the ark and the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings in it. The Levitical priests carried them up. And this one is a bit confusing because the tent of meeting is sometimes called the tabernacle. And when the Israelites wandered in the desert, that was where the ark was kept with some other special furniture. And the other special furniture would have looked something like some of this stuff. And it was used by the priests for special worship. So in David's reign, the ark was moved to the place where they're gathering now to get it. But they had like another tent also, and there's so many things, but everything right now is being brought back to Jerusalem. And this is a big, exciting thing. And they're carrying it in a big procession, which they had special poles for. So the priests would carry the ark using these poles that went through the sides that was built in, special to carry it. I actually like this artistic rendering that's a coloring in version. But it also includes the trumpeters that went in front. We'll get to the musicians in a few verses. For now, we'll go back to the text. King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted. Which we know is a lot because just one chapter before, it says they sacrificed 1,000 animals. And in just 2 chapters' time, during the middle of Solomon's dedication ceremony for the temple, it lists that he sacrificed 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So this is an even bigger number that they can't count. And then the priests brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place. and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and covered the ark and its carrying poles. Now, cherubim is a Hebrew word that we just don't even bother to translate and drop into our Bibles. But a cherub is a class of warrior angel. And cherubim is just the plural of the word in Hebrew. So those are the angels that are in this version depicted sitting on the top. And they look different in different pictures that you'll see of the Ark of the Covenant in their size and shape and stuff. But what I want us to do is have an awareness that biblical cherubim are these fierce, four-faced warrior angels. These are the guards standing next to God's throne. And I think that the Byzantines and Russian Orthodox mosaics do the best artistic representations of cherubim because they get all of the faces and all of the wings and all of the eyes that are described in the Bible. And what I really care about doing is making sure we get the Renaissance babies out of your head when you're thinking of the guards standing next to God's throne. Because throughout the Bible, there's mentions of God enthroned between the cherubim. And it's talking about this representation here that's on earth. There's the in heaven and the earthly representation of this ark. And it's sometimes called the mercy seat. And God's throne on earth here is where his presence comes at this super special box. And it's so special that it can't be touched by people. It has those poles designated people carry it with. And if you don't do that and you accidentally touch it, you'll die, as learned in 1 Chronicles 13, if you want to read that story. But I really want us to understand this isn't like a precious moments figurine angel on top of a jewelry box situation. It's a big deal, and the poles were apparently longer than the picture that I have, because what it says is that these poles were so long that their ends extending from the ark could be seen from the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they're still there today. And there was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt. And I just want to make a couple more notes here before we actually zero in on our big idea, because this wording is a little bit weird, and the author of Chronicles knew what they were doing when they wrote this book, but they were writing centuries after this event happened, after the dedication of the temple, and in the interim, there was a whole exile and some destruction and things going on. So the phrase, they're still there today, is really likely just an idiom that meant the poles just stayed there. And what the author is trying to do is on purpose focus our attention to that the ark came to the temple on purpose, and there's something super important in the ark for us to pay attention to and look at. Again, the author would have known that this box stored things through the history of Israel related to the relationship between God and his people. But right here, we're focusing in on the covenant. That's what's going to get us to our main idea here. The Lord made a covenant with the people of Israel. And that's a particular kind of binding contract. It's a promise. God made a promise to these people, a promise that is in part being fulfilled in this moment. And this is a huge celebration because God came through on his promise to his people to be with them and make Jerusalem his chosen home among his chosen people, Israel. And this is worth celebrating. As promised, God shows up to celebrate when his people celebrate. It's almost too simple. Can God really care that much about celebration? Yeah, he does. It's literally baked into the Jewish calendar. It's purposefully part of their life. They have these massive festivals where they're obligated to party. And every 7 years, it's like a super amplified celebration in the year of Jubilee. And this care for celebration is something that God carries through into the new covenant with instructions to Christians that we're to rejoice in the Lord always. He still cares about celebration. So circling back to our uncountable sacrifices, Solomon is leading the charge with all the leaders of Israel, and this is a corporate project to sacrifice and celebrate. And next, we read that it's all in on the musical worship element. We have rostered musicians each week at RCC, just like they did in temple worship time. But this says that everyone showed up for this event. Can you imagine if we packed all of our band members on the worship band up on the stage for one event? But that's what's going on here. Starting at verse 11, it says, "The priests then withdrew from the holy place. All the priests who were there had consecrated themselves regardless of their divisions. All the Levites who were musicians, Asaph, Heman, Jeduthun, and their sons and relatives, stood on the east side of the altar, dressed in fine linen and playing cymbals, harps, and lyres. They were accompanied by 120 priests sounding trumpets. The trumpeters and musicians joined in unison to give praise and thanks to the Lord. Accompanied by trumpets, cymbals, and other instruments, the singers raised their voices in praise to the Lord and sang, 'He is good. His love endures forever.'" And this is the exciting part. God shows up. Then the temple of the Lord was filled with the cloud, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the temple. Through the story of Israel, there are loads of places where the physical presence of the Lord is represented with a thick cloud. Have you ever been in a place that's just thick with God's presence? I've had a handful of those experiences in my life. They're so precious when you're in a space and you just know, there's no other words, it's thick with God's presence. It sometimes happens in the big top at Easter camp, but I've also felt it at a picnic table on a summer day in Germany with just a couple of people praying together. It's not about the place, it's about the presence. And something changes in this moment. When this whole congregation lifts up their voices and their music, God comes down and he settles among them. And it's special. And I'll note here that while it's musicians listed as the rostered in this moment, it's signifying the corporate worship experience. And it gives everyone a participatory role. And that's so relevant to us. This service today is rostered with youth, giving some adults a week off. But there are a couple hundred of you who have a place today in corporate worship. You can be a part of singing songs together in this service. You can also join in the greeting team and coffee team and a whole lot of other rostered teams and service roles on other weeks. But this one day, when everyone has something to offer in this story, reminded me of the one day a year that our church has a service role for every member of the congregation on one day together. And if you've not been around RCC for long, every year on Mark Wells' birthday weekend, we change up what church looks like. And it's not about Mark. But every year, we put on the biggest Jesus celebration block party and shut down the street to see if we can outdo ourselves in generosity in Jesus' name to our neighborhood. It's so cool, and it's just a little sparkle of what this party of parties celebrating the return of the ark is all about. And God is excited about it too. He's excited about the corporate celebration of his name. God shows up. There's a physical representation of his presence in this place when people are obedient to bring the ark to the temple and offer these generous sacrifices. People have met Jesus at the street party here. And God is excited about this kind of celebration. This is consistent in his character, and Solomon highlights that in the beginning of his dedication prayer that we're going to wrap up with. So beginning in chapter 6, verse 1, "Then Solomon said, 'The Lord has said that he would dwell in a dark cloud. I've built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever.' While the whole assembly of Israel was standing there, the king turned around and blessed them. Then he said, 'Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who with his hands has fulfilled what he promised with his mouth to my father David. For he said, since the day I brought my people out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city in any tribe of Israel to have a temple built so that my name might be there, nor have I chosen anyone to be ruler over my people Israel. But now I have chosen Jerusalem for my name to be there, and I have chosen David to rule my people Israel. My father David had it in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, "You did well to have it in your heart to build a temple for my name. Nevertheless, you are not the one to build the temple, but your son, your own flesh and blood, he is the one who will build the temple for my name." The Lord has kept the promise he made. I have succeeded my father David and now sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised. And I have built the temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. There I have placed the ark in which the covenant of the Lord that he made, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with the people of Israel. God comes through on his promises. And that's why I think it matters that this big idea begins with, as promised, God shows up to celebrate when his people celebrate. God wants to be here. God gives us a reason to celebrate. He wants us to celebrate and to celebrate wholeheartedly. And for this last point, I'm mostly just going to borrow language from Richard Foster, who I think wrote one of the greatest books on spiritual formation of the modern era. The book is called Celebration of Discipline. And he has 12 different practices or disciplines that help a Jesus follower grow in spiritual maturity. And they fall into 3 categories with 4 each in them. There's the inward, outward, and corporate disciplines. And the last of his corporate disciplines, so the final chapter of his book, is a chapter on celebration. Celebration itself is a discipline, according to Richard Foster, and he says it's super, super important. Now, he also distinguishes that this is not plastering on a smile in terrible circumstances, but rather God's desire is to transform the misery, not to bypass it. So I want to acknowledge that there are hard things we go through, and to say that we celebrate on purpose is not to ignore struggles or trials or difficulties in our lives, but is to actually say that I love God so much I'll pay attention to invite him into that space and celebrate his name anyways. And I think perhaps even more significantly, Richard Foster says, in the spiritual life, there's only one thing that will produce genuine joy, and that is obedience. He says, joy is found in obedience, and when the power that is in Jesus reaches into our work and play and redeems them, there will be joy where once there was mourning. To overlook this is to miss the meaning of the incarnation. Now, here's where I'm going to start to get excited. Actually, let me rephrase that. Here's where I'm going to struggle to contain my excitement. When Solomon starts this party in the temple, God's physical presence takes up space centered on the mercy seat above the ark, but so thick in the rooms around that it's surrounding the people. And this same God who, as promised, showed up for this important celebration with the ark in the temple, this same God loved us so much that he sent Jesus. The Gospel of John tells us that the Word became flesh when it talks about Jesus becoming human. And in the Greek, the word he uses for become flesh, it's the word for tabernacle. It's referencing this special tent that was the forerunner of the temple, the first house of the Ark of the Covenant where God's presence dwelled. And this is where I think that words are cool and details matter, because Jesus put on human skin and moved into the neighborhood, as the Message translation says. And he did that so that we could be with him. We could be closer to his presence, to keep the party going. He made a way for us to be with him because we live in this broken world, and God said, I want to offer a better way. You can take this invitation to celebrate, invitation to obedience and following Jesus. It's a better way. Now, so much of Western Christianity, I think, has an overemphasis on the me and Jesus private connection, which it's a thing, it is a thing, but it's not the whole thing of what it means to be a Jesus follower. Theologian Paul Little says there's no such thing as a lone wolf Christian. And the picture that we have in 2 Chronicles is that of a whole nation coming together to celebrate the promises of God and enjoy his presence. One of the things that I love about the advertising for Southern Easter Camp is this big picture of the church. You'll notice here that in the tagline, it says, "The youth of the South Island coming together." And this is on everything that Southern Easter Camp puts out. And I think that's such a beautiful picture of it's the whole church. It's a nation that we gather together. And this is just one example that's youth-based. Another one I love is Open Heaven, which is an event that happens around New Zealand annually as thousands of people will come together and celebrate Jesus and pray for our city and our nation. But it's not super practical or sustainable to have those national events each week. In fact, over the course of Easter Camp, I work an equivalent to over 5 weeks worth of my contracted time for my RCC role. So I would literally die if we did that every week. But every year, I love it. I look forward to it. And then I hibernate for 2 weeks afterwards. But then after that, I go back to my life group with stories and celebrations about how this year 6 young people stood up and declared they wanted to follow Jesus for the first time, about how 4 youth have asked to get baptized in the coming weeks. These are exciting things to celebrate in that community space, in that ongoing rhythm. We start up youth group again during programming for term time after Easter Camp happens. And I still have a rhythm of community, of this life that is centered around celebrating Jesus, but it has these pockets of corporate hype. Speaking of corporate hype, do you know what stall you're going to volunteer at for the street party in November? That's still 6 months away. So in the meantime, I encourage you still have a reason to celebrate with things going on in your life. And because of that, I challenge you, commit to find a life group or a touch point of community, people that you can regularly gather with to pray and fellowship so that you know the people who you're celebrating with when we have these big moments of coming together. We had you move to sit with life groups to recognize who's around you. But I also recognize that there are other touch points of regular community that we didn't label. This is just one of the things that we have that can be a celebration of a small community group. But for those of you who are newer or haven't yet found a group or touch point that works for you, I do encourage you to look around where the groups are seated and see if there's someone you recognize in one of the life groups represented who you might ask about joining them this week. Or we have Andrew specifically targeted to the people that are with those. He'll be in the back to have conversations with you if you want to talk to him about joining a life group and don't know who to ask. This is an invitation. There is space for you somewhere. Knowing that there's more touch points than these, I also would encourage you to hang around after the service. If we have leftover baked goods from our bake sale, buy those up and have a chat with somebody about the community that they have in their life and how you can be a part of it. Now, as we move into the last song, we're going to have some corporate celebrating, and the band's going to come back on the stage. And I want you to know, God's going to show up to celebrate here. So I offer you another invitation. Will you be a part of this celebration?